Hey everybody, Necroxis here. I wanted to let you know that there is a new short story that was just released yesterday. I'm recording this late at night on the day that it came out, so I'm releasing it the next day. It just came out yesterday. It's about the Arakoa, which I really enjoy. If you've watched my channel for any amount of time about Warlords of Draenor content, you know my favorite overall storyline thus far in the expansion has been the Spires of Iraq one with the Arakoa. This story is almost everything you possibly could want to know about the Arakoa, and it's just fantastic. It is called Apocrypha, and I will leave a link to it in the comment below. Make sure to go and read it, because starting soon we're going to start discussing it. So I'll give you a countdown where you can pause the video, go read it, and then come back and join in the discussion. So here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's just start from the beginning. Hey guys, I wanted to put a little ad in here to explain some of the names of the Arakoa if you have forgotten them or don't know them, because I drop a lot of them very frequently. So, the two main characters of this story are Verix, who becomes High Seer Verix in the present time. She is at this point in the story, though, just an adherent, a regular member. She is a highborn Arakoa. She's a regular one with wings. The other main character is Iskar, who in the past in the story is a Sun Sage, a regular highborn Arakoa. He eventually, though, becomes Shadow Sage Iskar, which means his wings get cut off and he becomes corrupted. Another character in this story that's important is Rashad, basically the lore walker Cho of the Arakoa, and his pet Kaliri Percy, who you have met if you played the Spires of Iraq storyline. We also get to see Ikis in the story, who at this point in the story is a highborn Arakoa, but eventually within the story, as you'll see, he gets his wings cut off and he becomes the crazy Ikis that we know from our universe, who begins leading the corrupted Arakoa who worship Seth. And finally, Terok, the original Talon King, who we learn from both the storyline and this short story, used to be a pure highborn Arakoa before he is betrayed and cast down and turned into an outcast Arakoa. So we're going to meet various characters in this short story. We're also going to learn a little about the lore of the Arakoa, so I'm going to give you some backstory. The highborn Arakoa god, or I guess the god of all of them, is Rukmar, who is a phoenix-looking creature. Rukmar opposes the fallen or dead god Seth, who is responsible for the curse of Sethic. And then finally, the three groups we're going to be talking about in this story are the adherents of Rukmar, who are the highborn fanatical Arakoa, who we fight in Spires of Iraq. The Arakoan outcasts, who we ally with in Spires of Iraq, who are formed exclusively out of outcast Arakoa. The Apexis, which are basically a long-dead race of highborn Arakoa from the past, whose technology we are, or I guess the Arakoas now, are highly seeking. And finally, the Order of the Awakened, which is the combined efforts of the outcasts and what few pure highborn Arakoa that aren't crazy that join up together under Rashad after the events of the Skyreach instance happen, and we basically destroy most of the adherents of Rukkar's power structure. The Order of the Awakened comes out as a joint effort, basically trying to further the Arakoans as a whole, led by Rashad. So hopefully this helps, and let's get back to the review. This short story had basically everything I possibly could want to know about the Arakoa. It has a current update on what's going on with the Arakoa. We have like an origin story for High Seer Verix, who was the boss in Skyreach that we kill. We learn a lot about Iskar, who, if you watched my latest Garrison campaign video, you know there's a lot of shenanigans going on with that. We learned about Rashad. We learned about Percy when he was a little baby Kaliri. Everything was just fantastic. So let's start from the beginning. The very beginning of the story is set in the present tense. It is about Rashad. He's bringing together the outcast Arakoa, which, remember, are the ones who are cursed. Their wings were cut off by the highborn Arakoa, and they were thrown down from Skyreach into the cursed pools of Seth below and twisted into the Arakoa that we know from our universe. The crippled ones that can't fly and that are kind of like skinny and weak, but they're powerful and like shadow magics. So he's bringing together those and what highborn Arakoa, or the normal Arakoa, the ones that have wings that are like standing upright and that are powerful, he's bringing together what few of those remain who did not agree with High Seer Verix and her fanaticism, and the outcasts together into this order that we do see right now in the game, but they don't really have a presence in the live version of the game outside of being the people who will sell you like items for Apexis crystals, but they're called the Order of the Awakened, and they play a much bigger role in 6.2. Once again, if you're watching the Garrison campaign, the latest one I did had to deal with the Arakoa and Rashad and the Order of the Awakened and stuff like that. So Rashad seems to be, if not the leader, then the one coordinating everything behind the Order of the Awakened. I think he's the leader, but we haven't got confirmation on that yet. So he's bringing together the two groups of people. He's been looking through the histories of the Arakoa because that is his big deal. Like I mentioned, again, I'm going to keep referencing the last Garrison campaign because I talked about a lot of this, so I just want to refresh people who watch that and watch this video. But a reason I really like Rashad is because he's like Lore Walker Cho, where he knows a lot of the history of his people. And so after the heroes of the Horde and the Alliance and the Frostwolf Orcs and the Draenei go to Skyreach and basically destroy the entire power structure of the adherents of Rukmar, which are the purebred Arakoa who are kind of fanatically crazy, Skyreach has basically been dismantled at this point. Their giant, massive, like, ion cannon weapon that they've had has been destroyed by the heroes of the Alliance and Horde, and Rashad has basically taken everyone who's not crazy and has made them work together again because, as we find out in this short story, that is how the Arakoa originally were. They were not separated into these two different groups. In fact, the only reason the separation happened is because the very original adherents of Rukmar were a fanatical group who, and you learn this by playing the Spires of Iraq storyline, and this short story also reinforces it, the only reason the split happened in the first place is that the original adherents of Rukmar wanted more power for themselves in Arakoa society, and the person standing in their way was the Talon King. And he was the one with overall power, Talon King Terok. And they went and they overthrew him. They cut his wings off. Well, they went to go after his daughter because they thought that a good way to go after him would be to kill his daughter. So they take his daughter, they throw her body off of Skyreach. She falls all the way down into the pools of Sethik, and she basically dies. Terok, they cut his wings off and they throw him off as well. And he doesn't die, but he gets transformed. He's the first Arakoa who gets transformed into what they call the Outcast now. And he goes kind of crazy. But, he rallies together the original group of Outcasts. And we learn from this short story, we kind of knew it from the game, but this clarifies it. We knew from the short story that the very original Outcasts, the only reason they exist in the first place is because the original adherents of Rukmar, through Terok and all of his followers, his inner council, his inner circle, his biggest supporters, they cut off and threw them off of Skyreach. So the only reason the split of the Arakoa happened in the first place, once again, to recap this a little bit, is because the adherents of Rukmar just wanted to control everything. So this is where the story begins. Rashad pulls out one of these scrolls, which is called an Apocrypha. It is the name. I've heard of it before, but I'm not sure if Blizzard's using it in the actual definition. But in this sense, the Apocrypha are basically scrolls of history that the adherents of Rukmar are trying to hide. Like they're burying them or they're destroying them. But they've been kept fresh or make sure they haven't been destroyed by various people throughout the Arakoa's history. And so Rashad's looking for all of these because he wants a bigger picture of the Arakoan history. And he wants to try and convince the outcasts and the few remaining purebred Arakoa that there's no reason to keep hating and fighting each other, because the only reason that split happened is this one group of crazy highborn Arakoa wanted more power for themselves. So that's kind of the setting of the scene, and I really, really like it. And in addition to, they're also trying to find this information in conjunction with trying to find Iskar. Shadow Sage Iskar. He's the leader of the outcasts. Like I talked in the Garrison campaign video, he is the one that goes about helping you as the player acquire all of Terok's old things, and then he's the one who's orchestrating the flashback quests that you do, where you play as Terok when he's a highborn, you play as Terok when he's an outcast, and then you basically... Iskar, I gotta keep their names separate. Iskar is the leader of the outcast who's gone missing, and he's the one in the quest chain who, at the end of that quest chain, wants to sacrifice your body to be used as a vessel for Terok's spirit to come back into this world. Now, Rashad, who is part of the Outcasts, but is the lore walker Cho, basically, of this, didn't want this to happen, because he's the more reasonable one. So, in the end, when Terok's spirit basically doesn't go into your body and instead just empowers you, Iskar gets mad, not only because his plan didn't work, but also because a non-Arakoa got the power of the Talon King, and he has disappeared. So that is the setting of the story. Rashad's looking for all this information, as well as looking for Iskar, who has disappeared. And so then, that kind of bookends the whole story. Like, the story of Rashad looking for Iskar in the present tense, then we have all of the flashback, and then the end happens where we learn about what's going on. So, all in the middle, we learn the story of High Seer Verix. And if, once again, at the very beginning, like I stated, High Seer Verix is the leader of the adherents of Rukmar that we fought and killed at Skyreach. And we learn about her story and how she's connected to Iskar, and we actually find out that her and Iskar were actually clutchmates, which means they were hatched at the same time. They were, by the leaders of the Arakoa society, they were paired together to look after one another and to basically grow up together. But the difference is that Verix always was like, she's described as being very beautiful for an Arakoa, very powerful, very intelligent. She like knows the histories of her people, but she's also very stubborn. She's prone to rebelling against the teachings. Iskar, on the other hand, he's not prone to rebellion. He's very loyal to the Arakoan society, but the problem is he's not as talented and as beautiful and as strong as Verix. And as we see from the story, the leader, the High Seer of the Arakoa at this time in the past, whose name I can't remember, but it doesn't matter that much, he really is biased towards Verix because of how powerful and strong and beautiful she is. And so when they do things, I guess in the story likes to tell it, when Verix does things against the rules, both of them get punished. However, Verix gets a less punishment, even though she's the one that's done it. And Iskar gets the greater punishment for no other reason other than he's paired with her, and he's not as good as she is. So that kind of sets up the whole tragic past to Iskar and why what ends up happening in 6.2. I'm trying not to, I'll just spoil it. So here's some spoilers for 6.2. I guess shut off the video now if you don't want to hear it. But 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This sets up the scene or the understanding of why Iskar does what he does in 6.2. In joining up with Gul'dan and drinking the demon blood to become a purebred Arakoa again, because he does. Like, if you watch my last Garrison campaign video, he drinks the demon blood and somehow that transforms him back into a highborn Arakoa. Granted, he's corrupted to the Legion, but he is one of those again, and he can fly again. So, this whole short story sets up, the personality of Verix, which, if you played the Spires of Iraq storyline, she's not mentioned at all. She's mentioned in passing as the leader, but her personality is never brought up. Why she's doing what she's doing is never brought up. This short story answers all those questions. We know why she's doing what she's doing. We know the mentality that she has when she does things. So, I guess continuing on, we get to see, basically, I'm looking at the short story right now to make sure I'm keeping things chronologically. So, the story begins with the Verix and Iskar working together. They're trying to basically what happens is Verix and Iskar are being punished because they didn't attend some ceremony on time, so they're being punished by being forced to go down into the lands of the Spires of Iraq and kill a bunch of Ravager eggs, because Ravagers like to encroach on Arakoa, blah 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 blah. So while they're doing this, Verix sees another highborn Arakoa that she doesn't recognize. And no one else is supposed to be down here at the base level at the ground, besides those two who are being punished. So she goes and follows him. And she actually follows him into a outcast village, an Arakoa outcast village, where this mysterious highborn Arakoa who's cloaked, he ends up meeting with a younger Rashad, who at this point is already an outcast. He's already corrupted, he can't fly, he's already an outcast. And Rashad gives this mysterious figure he begins to give it a scroll. But while Verix is watching all of this, I guess 2 guards of the Skyreach come down, Talon guards, I think they're what they're called, and they take up this Highborn Arakoa who's not supposed to be here, and they reveal that he is Ikis. And if you guys have played Burning Crusade, Talon King Ikis was the big bad Arakoa boss of, the instance, and the leader of the crazy Arakoa that we fight in Burning Crusade. He's also in this expansion, but he's more of he's a quest boss that you fight. And at this point in this expansion, he's already kind of crazy, and he's already worshipping Seth, who, is evil. Like, he's an evil dead god that opposed Rukmar, the god of the adherents. So basically, we find out that Rashad's giving this scroll to Ikis, who gets caught by the Highborn Arakoa. He gets whisked away. Iskar, who's been following Verix, the 2 of them also get whisked away. The High Seer tells Iskar to watch over Verix because, and then we're going to have to go into a side note real quick. What's really interesting about this short story is that we get to see the mentality behind how the Highborn Arakoa deal with people becoming cursed and becoming basically the outcasts. And what the reveal ends up being is that it's basically all an entire witch hunt. And it's basically all made up to protect this big secret that, that Talon King Terok wasn't a terrible guy, and that the Order of Rukmar, who now is controlling everything, actually screwed him over and cast him out. So they're basically propping up this entire false narrative, and anybody who begins to question this gets called of being tainted with the outcast corruption, and they have their wings cut off and they're expelled out of Skyreach. And it's not because they're actually corrupted, it's because the leaders of Rukmar are trying to uphold this lie so that they can keep a hold on their power that they've had. So, now cutting back to the story, the High Seer tasks Iskar, who is Verix's clutchmate, to watch over her, because she went into an outcast village, it's possible that she can be tainted, which is all a bullshit lie. The High Seer just wants to know what Verix saw and Verix heard and what she's doing. So the next part of the story is Iskar following Verix, and basically what happens is that Verix hears a couple things between Rashad and Ikis before he gets spirited away. He hears, she hears Iskar, I'm getting his Arakoa names mixed up. Let's start over again. Verix hears Ikis talk to Rashad, and the 2 of them notice Verix before the guards come down. And Verix is basically like, what are you doing here? You're a Highborn Arakoa, you're not supposed to be down here. And Ikis is at this point is kind of already, he's not crazy, but he's kind of spouting off like crazy things. He basically tells Verix, it was all a lie, everything we heard about Terok was a lie, everything is lie, it's all lies. He keeps repeating this phrase, it's all lies, they're lying to us, there's all lies. So after he gets spirited away, Verix gets in her head, I have to know the truth, I have to know what's going on. So, as Iskar is watching over her, she doesn't know she's being spied on. She's going through the very old histories of the Arakoa, and she notices something very strange, that in all of the public texts that the Arakoa have describing Talon King Terok, they're all not only similar, they're all identical, word for word, copy-pasted basically, in all of the texts, regardless of when they were written by the adherents of Rukmar. And she thinks that's strange, and it's kind of validating what she heard from Ikis, that they're all lying. Because she says to Iskar, after he confronts her about it, isn't it strange that all of these texts that are written decades apart are word for word exactly the same when describing Terok? And during this whole commotion, Iskar is kind of having like a crisis of faith, because he doesn't want to turn on Verix, because it's his clutchmate, basically his sister, is what basically they are, brother and sister. And maybe not like genetically, but that's how they were raised. So he's having this crisis of faith. He's told by the leader of his people he needs to spy on his sister and tell him what she's doing. He doesn't want to do it, and when he goes back to talk to the High Seer, he ends up lying to him about what Verix is doing. And I think it's very interesting, because the story makes it a point to mention that in this scene where Iskar is lying to the High Priest, for the first time in his life, he feels powerful. He feels like he's in control. And I think it's a really good analogy, because his entire life, he's always lived in Verix's shadow. He's always been the weak one. He's always been the less powerful one. He's always been the uglier one. He's always been the less graceful one. But in this specific case, because the High Seer gave him this task, the High Seer is believing what Iskar is saying, even though it's a total lie. He tells the High Seer Verix isn't doing anything. Verix is like reciting the prayers of Rukmar, and she's more dedicated than ever when the truth is the total opposite. She's trying to find out the truth. I think it's very interesting to note that in this moment, the story makes it a very blatant point to point out Iskar feels more powerful than ever in this moment. And I think it's because this is the very first time in his life where he's taking control of something on his own, and it's successful to a degree. The High Seer believes him, and he leaves knowing that he has manipulated the outcome in his favor for once. The very first time it's ever happened. So I think it's a really powerful scene that really sets up the mentality of Iskar and really explains, or I guess provides more insight into everything that happens in the Spires of Iraq storyline, as well as in 6.2. So basically what happens after that is Iskar confronts Verix, tells her, look, our leader is telling me that I need to spy on you because you're being weird. You are acting very strange. And so the two of them decide to go visit Rashad in the village. Well, Verix decides to, and Iskar kind of tags along. Where they are supposed to be actually right now, the rest of the Arakoa society is witnessing the exile ceremony, which is what happens when one of the Arakoa is deemed cursed and cast out. And the one that they're doing it to is Ikis, who got captured and spirited away by the guards. We get to watch the pretty horrific process of what the Highborn Arakoa do when they cast somebody out. And they legit take like a giant sword and just cut the wings off the person and just kick them off of Skyreach. And a lot of them just die when they fall. But, you know, as we know from the rest of the Spire storyline, Ikis survives. He falls into the pools of Seth. He becomes corrupted and transformed into an outcast. And that story is kind of over. But while that ceremony's happening, and everybody's supposed to be there, it's one of those things where the adherents of Rukmar forces everyone to be there as kind of like a, now remember, this could happen to you one day if you fall out of Rukmar's favor. Because the whole charade is, they're holding up this lie that the outcasts have fallen out of favor with Rukmar, when in actuality it's just they're trying to hold on to the power that they usurped from the Talon King. So they put on this public spectacle whenever someone gets kicked out for doing whatever they deem as corrupted. And basically, sorry, my Steam just popped up as I was talking. So, lost my train of thought. So basically, this whole charade is the leaders of the Arakoa are basically putting on this circus, basically, to scare everyone into not questioning what they're doing. So, that's what's going on when Verix, being trailed by Rashad, goes to the village that Ikis was at, talking to Rashad. I said Rashad instead of Iskar earlier. Let me repeat myself. I'm sorry. These Arakoa names are confusing, I understand. I don't blame you if you're confused. Maybe stop and repeat if I'm going too fast. Basically, Verix goes to meet Rashad, who was talking to Ikis before he gets spirited away. She goes back to that same village, and Iskar is trailing her. And she goes to the village, and she repeats this line that she heard Ikis say, which is Shadows Gather. And that is kind of like a code phrase to Rashad that an ally would use to show them that even though I'm a Highborn, I sympathize with you and I'm not your enemy. So Rashad shows up, and Rashad's basically like, I don't know who you are. What are you doing here? Why do you want this very... She tells him, give me the scroll that you were going to give to Ikis. And he's basically like, why would I do that? I don't know who you are. She threatens Rashad with a knife, but then she notices that Rashad already had a knife on her, like ready to kill her. But then he basically says, look, you are a truth seeker. You are here to learn what happened. If I wanted to kill you, I would have killed you already. So he gives her the scroll, and then she leaves. At this point, Iskar confronts her and basically is like, bro, we're not supposed to be here. This is super suspicious, especially after we were already caught here in the first place. She shows him that scroll. They go back into their rooms, like way back in Skyreach, and they're looking through it, and they realize that the scroll that Rashad was going to give to Ikis is one of the Apocrypha, the same one that he gets at the beginning of the story, that basically says the entire story of Terok that the adherents of Rukmar are telling everyone is fucking complete bullshit. Like, the actual history is that they overthrew him and cast him out and killed his daughter and usurped his power and killed all of his, or, you know, cast out all of his inner circle. And after Verix learns this, she's kind of like... The difference between Verix and Iskar in this regard that I hadn't brought up is, as Verix is in the outcast village, she repeatedly is like, these people are disgusting, they're corrupted, they're in the mud, they're not where they're supposed to be, they're not up in the heavens with the light shining, the sun shining on them. I don't know why anyone would try and combine these two groups of people. So after she learns this truth, she's basically like, well, first of all, she doesn't know if she should believe it. And Iskar is basically like, why would anyone lie about this? Like, why would they lie from the opposite perspective? They understand why the adherents of Rukmar would lie about it, because they became leaders of the society. But why would the other side lie about Terok? It makes no sense. That's Rashad's counter. And then Verix basically says, I don't really care, because I don't want to unite our peoples again. Because the outcasts are disgusting to her. And she basically says, look, we need to burn this scroll. And so then they kind of fight one another for a second, and then it turns out that the High Seer has been spying on them the whole time, and Verix only escapes getting punished because she's been trying to destroy the scroll the whole time, where Iskar is trying to save the history. Because he wants the truth. He likes the truth. Now that he knows the truth, he's not going to follow the adherents of Rukmar anymore. They've been lying to him and everybody the entire time, and he's a follower of the truth. So the High Seer has been spying on them. Apparently he has some ability to, like, control and look through the eyes of the Cleary, which is interesting. We've never really experienced that with Arakoa before. But throughout the story that I hadn't brought up, the story mentions that there's Cleary nearby as everything's happening, and we find out at the end that the High Seer at that time was looking through the eyes of the Cleary and spying on them basically the whole time. So what ends up happening at the very end is the two of them get basically imprisoned. Verix gets placed in like this weird magical cell where there's a dark cape around it and she can't see outside of it, and the sun's not coming in on her. And it's the big theme of the Arakoa, if you guys haven't remembered from the Spires, is the sun. The sun is the power of Rukmar, their goddess, and if you're not in the sun, then you feel weaker, you know, you're depressed, you're sluggish. So her punishment is basically to sit in this cage where the sun's blocked off from her. It's magically enchanted to not be warm, to actually be cold. And the High Seer basically says, I've been too lenient on you, but I'm not going to punish you like I'm going to punish Iskar, but you need to be taught a lesson. So he puts her in this cell, and when he lets her out, he brings her into this big chamber, his chamber, where they find two Talon guards holding Iskar. And basically, the High Seer gives Verix the sword and says, this is what you need to do to prove you are in the sun and not in the shadows. You need to cut off Iskar's wings and cast him down below to prove you are loyal to us. And this is, I guess, real criticism of the story. They don't really go through Verix's mindset of why she does it, but she eventually does do it. I mean, not eventually, she does it. She does it pretty much without question. It's probably because she's been tortured a bit by being in this cell, but she cuts off Iskar's wings, and we all know he eventually becomes the leader of the outcasts. And then that's basically the end of the story. And so then we cut back to present day once again, where, you know, the outcasts and the highborn Arakoa together are listening to this story. Rashad is basically trying to, by telling the story to everyone, he's trying to say, like, look, even though there's been such a big split in our peoples, you know, the leader of the outcasts was once a clutchmate of the leader of the adherents of Rukmar, and they were friends for a long time. And the only reason they were split up is because the High Seer at the time wanted to maintain his power hold, and he made Verix basically outcast Iskar. And so the story ends with you know, people who are looking for Iskar in the present tense not being able to find him. And in fact, it turns out that the Arakoa they were sent to look for him were killed by Iskar himself. So it sets up the events of 6.2, which is what he does in drinking the blood and becoming purebred again. And Rashad's worried about it because he has noticed that in the last couple years, Iskar has gone a little bonkers, which we see happen in the quest chain in 6.0. So, I wanted to repeat the whole... Okay, here we go, yeah. So basically, Rashad's entire point in explaining the story to everybody. Remember, there are outcasts as well as the few purebreds left, is to remind everyone that the Arakoa Society is twofold, but the twofold used to work together. And it goes back to that entire quote that we hear Ikis use, we hear Verix use, we hear Rashad use, and it's the Shadows Gather quote. But what you never hear outside of Rashad is the entire thing. And I think it's very important, so I'm going to read it to you. And Rashad says this to everyone in attendance. He repeats the quote. He says, "Shadows gather when the raven swallows the day. Burning sky is extinguished as black wings fold gently above the heavens. Rest, my children, rest, for even the sun must sleep." And the point is that you have the sun, you have the purebred Arakoa, and then you have the shadows, you have the outcasts. And they should be working together. They shouldn't be fighting one another. Because light and dark are two sides of the same coin. Like, that's the whole point of the Arakoa Society that Rashad's trying to build now with the Order of the Awakened. So the story basically ends there with Rashad telling everyone in attendance, eat your food, go and rest. We're going to need everyone's help in the times to come because something weird's happening. Iskar is killing his own people, not trying to get found. There's a weird thing happening. So that's the whole synopsis of the story. I just thought it was fantastic. They keep topping their short stories one after another. And I thought this one is my new favorite for Warlords of Draenor. It might be my most favorite short story they've ever done. I just think it's fantastic. I really, really enjoy the look into the Arakoa Society. My one criticism besides the Verix thing is, while this is an amazing short story, the last couple short stories Blizzard has really not failed, but it's been disappointing that these short stories come out after the majority of this storyline has already happened. Like, I feel like this short story should have come out before... I guess I understand why it's after 6.0, because it kind of gives away a little bit of their foreshadowing for Iskar in 6.2. But I really feel like the insight into Verix when she becomes High Seer, the dichotomy between Verix and Iskar, while fantastic to know now, and I still really, really like it, don't get me wrong, I feel like I would have been a little bit more appreciative of the story in the context of the game if we knew it, like, as the game came out instead of after, if that makes sense. Like, if this short story existed as the Spire of Iraq story was released rather than afterwards. Does that make sense? I know it's a little bit of a weird criticism, but one of the few things I didn't like about the Arakoa storyline was their leader, High Seer Verix. She had no personality. Like, you never meet her in the storyline. She's vaguely referenced. The Highborn Arakoa Society is vaguely talked about. You pretty much don't know why they're doing what they're doing outside of them hating the outcasts. And this whole short story explains why all of those things. Like, why they hate the outcasts, why Verix is the way she is, why they're doing what they're doing, why they're trying to destroy the outcasts. And while the quest chain in the game explains this a little bit, it's more about Terok in the game, which is fine, because I love Terok's story. I just would have liked the two together before. I would have liked a lot of this information before I did the storyline, because I would have gotten a much better appreciation of it. That's my one criticism. I'm not going to say like it's a huge deal, but I like to at least bring up things that I might had a little bit of a problem with in these reviews, because I've noticed this whole review and the last review is pretty much like, this is the best thing ever, there's no problems with it at all. There were still a couple problems, but there you go, Apocrypha. It is the new short story. I'm going to give credit where credit is due. It is written by Matt... Wait, what's the person's name? Matt Burns, is entitled, again, Apocrypha. It just came out last night. So if you are interested in the story and you haven't read it but watched this whole video, I don't know. Maybe I forgot something. I don't think I did. But you should definitely go read it yourself. Give the page a view at the very least. It's very, very good. it sets up a great connection between the end of 6.2 or the end of 6.0 and the beginning of 6.2. So there you go. Thanks for watching, everyone. Let me know your feelings of the short story in the comments below. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my points about the short story, how you feel about the Arakoa storyline. Do you like the dichotomy between Iskar and Verix? I think it's great. I really like how they set that up. It feels like they planned this the whole time for things to fall into such a great groove. I don't know if they actually did and they got lucky, but either way, great. I really like it. So, thanks for watching, everyone. I will see you next time for whatever's next. Probably another Garrison campaign quest on 6.2 PTR. But, yeah. Leave all of your thoughts on the internet and below or on Twitter or wherever it's the internet. You can leave your opinion pretty much everywhere. But, yeah, let me know what you guys thought about this. I really liked it, and I'd like to hear what you guys think, too. So, thanks for watching, and hey, thanks for the people who were telling me on Twitter asking me what my thoughts were about this. I really appreciate it. I was kind of honored when you read it and you thought, hey, I wonder what Necro thought about this. So, thanks a lot to you guys, and I will see you next time. Farewell.